Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And I'm so thrilled today to be joined by the fantastically talented Tiffany Boone, who's currently starring in the Netflix movie The Midnight Sky. And I wanted to start by asking a little bit about the psychology and the way that you were thinking about this character, because obviously going off to NASA and training to be an astronaut for your character isn't something that someone just falls into one day. It's not an accidental career. There's even before someone starts pursuing that, there's so many years of like dedication and training that's so specific to that world. And so I was really interested in what some of the research was and what some of your process was in not just understanding the mechanics of her job, but really understanding, what drove her to this space initially and what the mindset was that put her into this world.
Yeah, it's interesting. I before we had the interview, I thought, oh, she's gonna ask me really specific questions about the character. And I have this thing of like, as soon as I'm done with a job, I like forget everything that I researched. I forget everything that I like thought about, which is so strange. But it's like the second I'm done, I'm like, what was that? But thinking back on it for Maya, for me was trying to figure out what in the world will make someone want to do this, because it's not an impulse of mine. Like I'm not interested in going to space at all. And I in building characters for me, I'm like always very much backstory based. So I create a whole life for them. So for Maya, she had this mother that was in and out of her life, and she um, had a very close relationship with her dad, and she has a sister, um, and she was always the perfect daughter, and she always was the smartest kid in the class, and she always did everything perfectly, and she always did it in order to kind of get what she wasn't getting from her mother, approval from her mother. So if I do this, if I get this grade, if I get this job, maybe mom will come back. And I think she kind of fell into STEM. I honestly, in my head, didn't have it that she actually was like in love with it. She didn't actually like, it wasn't always her dream to become an astronaut. It literally kind of fell at her lap. And she, she told her dad, like, oh, well, here's this opportunity. Someone came to me about maybe doing this thing. I don't know. And her dad's like, you have to do it. You have to do it. And she's like, okay, I'll do it. And that was kind of like how I kind of built her. She's constantly trying to please, and trying to get validation. But she goes into everything just thinking, oh, it's going to be great. Like she's kind of really a positive person. So that's how I built her. And I don't know, all the research that I did. I watched every documentary I could about prolonged periods in space. I watched a million films on space. I read as much as I could specifically about Black astronauts, because it's always important to me um, that I'm bringing the full Black experience to my characters, because a lot of times they're written by people who are not Black and don't have that experience. And so it's important to me that I'm looking as at a role as not only just being an astronaut, but being a Black astronaut. And I wonder how many Black astronauts, Black women astronauts there would be during that time by this time. And so yeah, that's kind of some of what I went through.
Yeah. Does the way that you tend to structure a backstory for your character always kind of take the same roadmap and the same journey, or does kind of the structure of what that looks like tend to look different depending on what the character's, kind of like needs and background actually end up being for you?
Yeah, it's always different, I'd say. I don't have yeah, it's always different. I don't have a certain way that I go about attacking
Mhm.
every character. It's whatever the character needs, or what, depending on what is in the script. There's not a lot for Maya as far as background in here, so I creating literally everything. Whereas some things, a lot is given to you, so you don't have to create as much, and the way you go about it is a little different. So yeah, each character I
Mhm.
approach differently for sure.
Right. There's really just kind of like that one scene where we see that she gets to kind of like watch a holograph of her life back on home beforehand, where we see her sister and her best friend and her cat. Was that kind of like the foundational jumping off point for you?
Yeah, it kind of was, because obviously those people are important to her.
Mhm.
And something that like no one will ever know is that I made it that the best friend, the friend from high school, she actually has realized that she's in love with that friend. And she kind of was awakened to it right before she left for this voyage, and was like, what is this? Trying to grapple with her sexuality and her love for her best friend. And so her real pull for going back home is to tell that best friend, I'm in love with you. And so that was like a driving force under everything for me, is like, get back to her, get back to her, get back to her. And so yeah, so that scene is what led me there.
Yeah, I really, really want to rewatch that scene and all of your scenes now just to see the way that you've played that in. I think that's so fascinating. Also, I love the way that you were describing that she kind of always has this, assertion trying to get validation. And obviously within the world that she's in now on this ship, like, there is a hierarchical structure. So how did that impact the way that you interacted with a lot of your castmates and the way that you thought about, the dialogue between them, or, kind of like how she would move into opportunities and new moments, given that there is still kind of like that underwriting need for validation, even though it's not her parents, like that kind of carries through into this space for her.
Yeah, I think she is obviously the rookie
Mhm.
on the team, um and so she wants to learn as much from them as
Mhm.
possible. So there's moments where you see her like watching them or listening or asking them certain questions, but also she wants them to respect her as a peer. And so specifically like that moment when she asks, like, does Ade, is he coming on the walk because of me? Is it because you're pregnant? He wants to watch out for you. Is it me? She,
Mhm.
even though she feels a little unsure, she wants to make sure that other people feel like she should have this job and should be where she is. So I think she's always volunteering. Sorry about that. Volunteering to do everything that she can. She's always the first one there. She's always the first one to get up. She's always the first one to volunteer to do something because she wants to prove herself. So I think that impacts a lot of her choices.
And then I was also really fascinated by, the specificity of the dynamic within this group of five, because they've been in an isolated space together with nobody else around and only each other to interact with for 2 years at this point. And then even prior to that, they would have been training together and really kind of building up a shorthand and rapport. So how did that impact a lot of the choices that you made in terms of just thinking about that shorthand and the way that they would interact with each other?
Hmm. As far as the shorthand, it's I think this is what I do. I do think there's not like the movie isn't very dialogue heavy. Do you get what I'm saying? It's not like
Yeah.
there's not a lot of us like talking to each other about what's going on, right? Which I think is good because at that point, when you're 2 years in, hanging out with people all the time, there's going to come a time when you're not going to have much else to say, right? And so I think that they are very comfortable with each other. They're very comfortable in the silence. And with us, I think it just kind of also came naturally for us as a group. It's like,
Mhm.
I always say it's the easiest group of actors I've ever dealt with, like the most laid back, drama free group of actors I've ever worked with. And I think there was an easiness with us. There was like
Mhm.
just a shorthand with us. And so I think it just naturally came to us in the characters. But I also think like I built in my head, obviously, specific relationships with
Mhm.
each person. And so I'd say, for Maya, her closest, she has, a few people that she's closer to. And then with a day, he's kind of her boss. So she kind of keeps herself away from him a
Mhm.
little bit more. With Mitchell, he's so in his own world, she's a little afraid of him. So it's like having very specific relationships with each person, I think helps with that as well.
Yeah. And I love the way that you're describing what that dynamic was with the rest of the cast, and the way that you've talked about George Clooney as a director. It sounds like a lot of that also really came from him. You know, we think about a director kind of making sure that a set functions, but also they're really setting the environment and the tone. And it sounds like it's something that he's very conscious of. Is that something that you've really kind of like seen other directors take that specific care of just making sure that, you know, it's a fun place to come to work and that people are enjoying what they're doing as well, you know, along with running a tight ship at the same time?
Yeah, I've never seen it in the way that George does it.
Mhm.
It's so specific because I'm sure I know that there's other directors who are kind of mindful of that, but I find, being a director, you're juggling so many things, right? And sometimes making sure everyone on set is happy isn't your first priority, and I get that. And some directors are just trying to get the work done and keep their head down and make sure that the work is great. But specifically with George, and I think it is because he's an actor, and it is because he just thinks life should be fun.
Mhm.
He really is committed to making sure that it is an enjoyable work experience for everyone. He wants it to be great for him, so he's like, the only way it's going to be great for me is if the rest of you suckers are happy. And he's like, I mean, literally, like, how's your housing? Are you sure? Is your housing fine? Do you need us to move you? How's your trip? Like, he's really making sure that everyone feels great. And I think you see that in the work.
Mhm.
I think you there's an easiness to everyone on the set because we just were having a good time. And so I hope more directors create spaces like that, because I
Mhm.
mean, I can honestly be in any interview and only have positive things to say about the experience, and I think everyone who was a part of the experience would say the same thing.
Mhm. And what are the specifics in terms of the way that he kind of uniquely communicates with you and discusses scenes? Because, you know, again, kind of going back to the fact that obviously he is an actor himself as well, like he knows exactly what it is that he's asking for you and also where he's asking you to go to bring that in a scene in a moment as well.
Yeah. With George, he's not the person who's going to sit down with you for a scene and talk for 10 minutes about what's happening or what's happening with your character. And it's because he trusts us to already know what's happening. And um and yeah, it's mostly that. I think he just trusts that that's we know what's happening. Obviously, if you have a question, he's there to answer it. He'll change lines on the spot, but because he is an actor, I mean, it's like the direction is very to the point, very quick. Um, it's he's not over directing you. He's allowing you to make choices, um, and he doesn't do a lot of takes. It's like, I
Mhm.
got it. You want another one? You don't need another one. Let's keep it going. But he also, in emotional moments will be like, take your time, and do you need a moment? All of that stuff that you need without going overboard. He's very efficient. He's a very efficient director.
Yeah. And in terms of the camera choices that he makes as well, you know, he spent several months doing a lot of pre-visual effects work and, you know, walking around an imaginary spaceship with a VR headset, but so that he could figure out like what are the specific camera shots going to be. And when you have a moment like that where a director like knows specifically what every element of the film is going to look like, there's no kind of, oh, we'll put the camera over here and see how it's going to work for the spacewalk scene. You know exactly what that setup's going to be in every single moment. Did that really help you in terms of knowing also kind of like what he wanted from the performance based on the choices that he was making with the camera, particularly since there's so many moments where it's like very close and very intimate with your character?
Yeah, it is very helpful. He's like, he doesn't do extra coverage. He's like, I know I'm not going to use this angle, so I'm not even going to play around with that. So yeah, there's certain moments where and when you're on camera, when you're not on camera, all of that. So like, there's certain moments, like specifically that moment when I see the first drop of blood.
Mhm.
That probably took longer than anything else that we did
Mhm.
in the entirety of the shoot. And I knew, okay, this is a very important to George, and how I see this and taking my time with it. And I knew that was important because they were getting the placement of the camera so perfect. Like, he almost grabbed the camera himself to make sure it was at the perfect spot and was moving with my eyes perfectly. So yeah, there's moments like that when you go, okay, this is very important. It's right on my face. This is going to be a pivotal moment. And he's telling you like the sound is going to drop out at this moment. He's telling you every little element that you need to know so that it can form your performance, which I love and I think is brilliant of him.
Yeah. And within that scene specifically, there's so many things going on through your character in that moment. And kind of to the point that you were making earlier about like the validation, and she always wants to kind of like bring the excitement to what she's doing, she's still kind of bringing that into that moment, which I thought was really interesting. You know, she's completely, you know, stressed out, panicking, but at the same time she's still trying to like push herself into the headspace of everything is okay. And I thought you did such a fantastic job at like nuancing all those different emotions that she's processing, and the way that she's trying to override the way that she's actually feeling because of her training. So what was that like in terms of the journey of figuring out what are all of these multitude of layers going to be, and which moments am I going to let these different elements seep out into my performance for other people and other characters to see?
Yeah. Oh, what was the process? It's a good question. This is back to that I let everything go until it's over thing. Um, the process for me was something that's standing out for me in particular is that she's disappointed in herself. Like she's disappointed that she's the one that messed it up. And um, so for me, it's just moment to moment to moment um, realizing everything that's happening. So to me, it was just really important to stay in each moment and not skip ahead. And um, so when she first, you know, it's confusion. What is this? It's um, then it's oh no, and then it's oh crap, I have to say something. Like everyone's happy. This was great, and now I'm in trouble. And um, and I think especially when a day comes up to her, there's such disappointment that she has to tell him, you know, that it's like I messed it up. And then when he sees her side and she sees that look in his eyes, then it's like, oh no, oh no, oh no, so much fear. So I think, you know, I don't know, just going through it, like I said, is just really just sticking in the moments and not jumping ahead, which is hard to do. It really is hard to do, especially when you're doing something so technical. Through all of that, I'm on wires. I have on this space suit that weighs as much as me. And it's, you know, the temptation is to let's get to the end of this take because I want to get down. That's the temptation there, right? And or to sell something too soon. But I just tried to stay in each moment and discover like what she'd be feeling in each moment until you get to the pain and the, you know, it was important for George that it not just be about, oh, I'm dying. It's actually really painful. That's, you know, she's like, crap, this hurts so bad, mixed in with am I gonna die? What's happening? So it's a lot of things to play all at the same time.
I also thought the exchange between your character and Felicity Jones's character in that moment was really beautiful as well. The way that she's just kind of like locked in eye contact with you, holding on, and she's just like giving you that central thing to focus on. Kind of what was she bringing for you in terms of being your scene partner in that moment, and something that you really could just kind of like channel everything into from your performance?
Yeah, it was so important because
Mhm.
for me, I mean, why I like being an actor, I don't really like doing things by myself as an actor, like those scenes where you're just by yourself or figuring like that's not fun to me. I like to interact with people and especially in like really difficult scenes like that when there's so many elements, like the eyes of my fellow actor, like that's how I ground myself. And the second I looked at Felicity, I was like tuned into the scene because she was just giving so much love and
Mhm.
comfort and but you could still see the fear in her eyes. You know, it's that moment when you know you're talking to someone, you're like, oh no, I'm in trouble, and they're like, it's okay. And but their eyes are kind of like, it's not okay, it's not okay. So it's like it's the comfort of someone you love that is giving you all of the love that they can and all the comfort they can, and still, you know, the little bit of truth in there that it might not be okay. Um, yeah, it was so important to me. And I think she just really grounded me in that scene. And I think like what she was doing was beautiful. So it was so helpful.
Mhm. And you were mentioning before the spacesuit that you're wearing throughout the film, kind of really weighing as much as you do, and I think there's such an art to the way that you move in it once you realize that, because you're wearing this thing that's physically weighing every single muscle of your body down, and yet you're pretending that everything is completely weightless. So how do you even approach the physicality of just figuring out how you're going to move within that suit, physically lifting it and moving it, even just to kind of like bring your hand up. And at the same time, it's completely weighing you down in every single tiny motion.
Yeah, that's where the months of training came in. We trained, I it's so interesting because my mom watched the movie and she's like, I know you were there like filming to the end. So what happens? Like, why does this thing happen in the middle? Like, where were you? And I'm like, because I was in stunt rehearsal like constantly. If I would go and shoot a scene and then I would go back to stunt rehearsal for the rest of the day. And so um, for us, you're on this wire, which kind of does take weight. The second you go up on the wires and you're in the harness, it takes some of the weight off. Like it takes some of the weight for you. So um, it was actually easier to be up on the wires at moments than standing on the ground because of how heavy the suit was. But it's a constant battle to think about being weightless and what that means. And also specifically speaking normally, speaking at a normal pace while you're moving so slowly. And for me, it was difficult because I do have some dance training. And so they would be like, your hands are too balletic, like your hands are too graceful. When you're doing all of these things, like you have to let them go because it feels like a dance. Like I think that's kind of a good way to think of it is a dance, like you're dancing through a cloud or through, it has to kind of feel like that. But it was a constant battle, and literally we would be, doing takes and George would go, up, you're moving too fast, or there's not enough, it's not weightless enough, or when you touch something, you have to have the reverberation of, the bounce back. And so luckily having George was done other space movies, he could always like see it and then like give us the correction.
Yeah. With the fact that you were doing stunt work even throughout filming, like you were mentioning at the end of the day after shooting a scene, was there a difference in terms of that keeping you in the mental headspace of this character? Because you're still, you finished your scenes for the day, but you're still having to think about, you know, them as a character, how they're going to move, and just all these different elements for several hours.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think of it that way. I thought of it as being tortured sometimes. But for me, I was like, I just want to go. But yeah, I guess, I was Maya for all day, every day, even when I wasn't shooting. Um, so it is quite helpful, I guess, to just pretty much be staying in that place and thinking about her, not being able to let her go and just go home, to just constantly kind of be in her body,
Mhm.
is useful.
Yeah. And in terms of your craft and acting, what do you feel that you really learned about yourself as an actor, or kind of were skills that you feel like you got the opportunity to really evolve and develop further through working on this movie and playing Maya?
Yeah, I hadn't done. Am I lying when I say this? I don't think I haven't. Well, I definitely hadn't done wire work, but I hadn't done like CGI kind of stuff before. Um, and so to have to use that part of your imagination, because all acting is using your imagination, right? But specifically to see things that you are not really there, to create something out of thin air that someone will put in something after and the audience will have to see, it really stretches you to strengthen your imagination in new ways, and be very clear about every single thing you're seeing. And I wasn't sure if I would be able to do that or how it would come across. um, it was definitely like working a muscle in a different way. But I'm glad I had that experience, and it was really useful for me. And I feel like when I saw the final product, especially with the blood, it was like, oh, that was really what I saw. Like your imagination was working well, because that is exactly what I saw in my head.
Yeah. Well, I loved watching your performance, and especially from some of the details that you gave. I can't wait to go back and watch a lot of your scenes again in
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you so much for such a delightful conversation about the film, and
Thank you
congratulations.
so much.